This is how one man survived being lost 438 days at sea. Picture this, you're adrift in the vast, mysterious Pacific Ocean, surrounded by miles and miles of endless blue and nothing else in sight. The Pacific is so big that it covers more than a third of the entire planet, making it larger than all the land combined. With only a few scattered islands to break up the emptiness, the chances of being found are slim to none.
Help me!
For one man, Jose Salvador Alvarenga, the Pacific would become his prison and his salvation in an incredible tale of survival against all odds. This man, Jose, holds the world record that has never been intended to break, one that's unlikely to be surpassed anytime soon. Against all odds, he survived 438 grueling days lost in the sea, in the Pacific, a feat that's nothing short of miraculous. But how did he do it? What kept him alive when so many others would have perished? The answers to these questions can be found in the humble beginnings of his harrowing journey. In 2012, Jose Salvador Alvarenga was a seasoned fisherman, sailing the waters off the Mexican Pacific coast. On November 17th, he set out on a small fishing boat from the village of Costa Azul, accompanied by a fellow fisherman named Ezekiel Cordoba. They planned to be out for only a 30-minute fishing shift, so they were ill-prepared for the unimaginable ordeal that lied ahead. Their boat was a little more than a 7-meter canoe, with no roof or cabin, a small motor, and a refrigerator for their catch. Despite being aware of the storms of brewing, the lure of a day's earnings that could sustain them for weeks was too great to resist. The two fishermen set out risking all for a day's pay, traveling 120 kilometers from the coast to where the fish were biting. At 1 a.m., the storm they had hoped to avoid hit with full force, threatening to sink their tiny vessel. In a moment of panic, they cut their fishing lines and jettisoned their catch and most of their gear, hoping to make the boat more maneuverable. With the coast only 6 hours away, they battled stormy seas, frantically trying to make it back to safety. Dawn was breaking and they were just 24 kilometers from the safety of the shore. The mountains on the horizon presented a welcoming sight, but fate had other plans. Their motors sputtered and died, leaving them powerless in the face of strong winds that was now pushing them further out to sea. Without paddles, oars, or a sail, their tiny boat was at the mercy of the elements, carrying them further and further away from civilization. Their board radio still functioned, and in a desperate bid for help, they radioed their position to their boss, who promised to come to their aid. But as the batteries began to die, all they heard was silence. Their last link to the outside world was fading. The frustration and despair they must have felt as they watched the mountains slowly slip away from their boat as they were carried further and further out to the Pacific Ocean must have been unbearable. Their boss organized a search party, but as the days passed and their boat drifted further out into the unknown, the chances of finding them dwindled. It wasn't long before the search was called off. The winds had carried them a staggering 450 kilometers away from the shore, leaving them completely isolated. They were in the middle of the Pacific. With no roof or cabin, their small boat was invisible from the sky. They were without any means of signaling for help. How were they going to survive? To survive, they had to resort to catching fish and birds with their bare hands, facing a seemingly hopeless situation with nothing but the vast empty ocean surrounding them. As time passed, Ezekiel's mental health started to deteriorate, and one day he snapped. He went completely mad, ranting and raving, accusing Alvarenga, saying it was all his fault that this situation had even happened, and saying things like, "We're never gonna get rescued. It's hopeless. We might as well give up." And this is where it got crazy, because Ezekiel started refusing to eat and drink whatever they caught, and eventually died. Alvarenga was then completely alone, in the middle of the ocean with no one to talk to and only his thoughts for company. This must have been a terrifying and traumatic experience. But somehow, he found the strength to carry on. Alvarenga was completely alone, facing his own mortality and only his wits to keep him alive. He was surrounded by the endless expanse of water, and the only sounds he heard were the waves crashing against his tiny boat. He had no supplies and no one to talk to, and his only source of food and water were the birds that landed on his boat and the turtles he caught by hand. Yet despite the overwhelming odds against him, he refused to give up. He clung to hope and kept himself alive through sheer willpower and determination. And as the days stretched into months and he continued to drift aimlessly through the Pacific, he never lost faith that someday he'd be rescued. But could he really ever make it back to civilization? Ships passing through the area were rare, but even then, Alvarenga claimed to have encountered one, a cargo ship, supposedly sailed right by him, with 4 men on board who noticed him and waved. Yet, they continued their journey and never stopped to help. Thought of being lost for months, completely isolated, and finally seeing a glimmer of hope, only to have been ignored, must have been frustrating. I can't even imagine how disappointed Alvarenga was and must have felt at that moment. 11 months into his misadventure at the sea, Alvarenga was a shadow of his former self. He had traveled approximately 8,000 kilometers from the Pacific. His clothes were ripped and torn apart, withered away, with only a sweatshirt protecting him from the sun. He was close to desperation. Then on January 30th, 2014, he spotted coconuts floating against his ship. That's when he knew he must have been close to land. You see, birds were starting to land around him. It offered such a glimmer of hope that maybe he was close to an island, and that he was. He spotted an uninhabitable island near the shore and swam to it. After half a day of drifting, upon reaching the shore, he found a house and knocked on its door, making contact with other humans for the first time in over a year. He had traveled an incredible 11,000 kilometers, and his journey had come to an end. Alvarenga had finally found his way back to civilization after spending 438 days lost at sea. Alvarenga was washed up on the shores of Iban Atoll, located at the southern tip of the Marshall Islands, one of the most isolated spots in the world. If he had missed this location, his next probable destination would have been the Philippines, approximately 5,000 more kilometers away. Given that it took him 438 days to travel roughly 11,000 kilometers, it is estimated that reaching the Philippines took him an extra 420 days. Yeah, he's lucky he found that island. Alvarenga's tenacity and determination to survive against all odds is inspiring and shows the human spirit's ability to overcome most of its difficult circumstances. But wait, just as you may think the story is over, there's more. Alvarenga was flown back to his home in El Salvador, where he published his book. Despite being through one of the most haunting experiences a human could imagine, Alvarenga ended up facing a legal battle as the family of his deceased friend accused him of cannibalism. The lawsuit casted doubts on his story and created even more challenges for him. It shows that even surviving a year lost at sea, life can still throw an unexpected obstacle at you. Well, that's all I got for you today. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, comment down below how you would survive being lost at sea, and also hit that notification bell so that you can be notified when my next video is uploaded. Check out this video right here I did of a woman who claims that 4 intelligent Japanese robots killed 29 scientists and that it was a huge cover-up. Check it out, this one's crazy.